Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's February 11th, 2018, and today I thought I'd do another episode of Ask Me Anything. And Darlene commented probably a couple weeks ago and asked the question, well, what are the deer eating in the deer foraging in the food forest video? And you know, are we feeding the deer? Are we putting like hay out here or something like that, or corn? And the other question was, well, what is a food forest? And at first I thought, geez, this is going to be a real challenge because it's the middle of winter, and most people think of winter as being the last place on earth that they want to be out in the woods. It's actually a wonderful place to be. And so the deer are actually consuming, they're foraging for much of the food that are just below the surface of the snow that we're growing. They're part of the herbaceous layer and the root zone layer and the mycelial layer. So those are things that they're eating all winter long, and there's many spots you'll see them digging down and munching and crunching. The other thing, some of the herbaceous and even the grass layers that are coming up along the tree trunks, they gobble down on that as well. But they really love the clovers. They love clover like crazy, both the red and the white clovers, and they really love getting into the mycelium. They're eating soil. You know, that's one of the things, is really trying to discover what's actually going on out here. So the other question is, well, what is a food forest? Well, this is the wrong time of year to show you the bountiful supplies. Now, if you go back and through some of the videos, you actually see me going in and harvesting peaches and harvesting plums and so on. But it's kind of hard to see everything. So what a food forest actually is, in the way that I look at it, it's biomimicry. It's where we try to recreate a system where, based on what we see in natural systems, and we can talk about the different layers of a food forest by mimicking what we see, like in the woods behind us. There's an upper canopy, a lower canopy. There's bush layers, you know, your different berry bushes. You have your dogwoods, you have your big maples, your oaks. You have some the herbaceous layer where we got all sorts of different yarrow, comfrey, lots of different herbaceous layers depending on what time of year it is that you're going out and harvesting. And then you have a ground cover, and then you have a vining layer that climbs up the trees. And you know, around here we had lots of problems with poison ivy, so we replaced those with various other vining species as well. And then we have a root zone layer, and that's a really productive layer that's really beneficial. So we have, you know, comfrey, we have garlic, we have carrots, we have burdock, we have horseradish, because we grow so much horseradish. I seed that all throughout the food forest as well. And so you can, and chives is more the herbaceous layer. And then we have a fungal layer as well. So we're always seeding in the wood mulch that we're putting around some of the mushroom spores, and they produce the fungi that provide a myriad of beneficial components. Then we have an epiphyte, or we have like the lichen layer as well. So there's multiple layers, and all of them have a relationship, a mutualism or commensalism type of symbiotic relationship with each other. And I'm going to turn the camera around, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. Bear with me one second. So right here by the canal system, we've got a cherry tree here. This is a mulberry tree. You can see this is the one that I repaired this spring. I still have more work to do with it. I did a lot of pruning with it this fall. That's a catapla tree there. There's a row of sea buckthorn or sea berries. Then there's a marginal layer that goes right along the canal edge and leading into pond 4. I'm going to turn around the other side of the access road here. Here's another cherry tree. These are all different types of cherry trees. There's a crabapple tree there. We have grapevines growing up over these arbors for us, the pergolas rather. And we have going across the bridges as well in the canal systems. On the other side are a whole variety of gooseberries and different currants on that area. We have pawpaw trees over on those areas there. And I don't know, you may not be able to see, there's tree tubes over there. And we have a different type of mulberry, and there's a magnolia. So we're integrating. Now these are all still young. Some of these are only 3 years. Yeah, these are mostly like 3 years old. In that tree tube there is a mulberry that I cut from the previous mulberry that I showed you. Here's another cherry, and we'll go along here. It's one of the gazebos by Pond 3, and the canal system goes in there. And so this is an apple tree here, a cherry. This is a plum tree here. Then we get to some of the ones that are about 5 years old. So this is a plum, a pear. I'm sorry, this is an apple. Over there's a pawpaw. Here's a pear. This is an aronia bush there. I think that's a plum there. Then we get to another pawpaw and 3 other types of aronias. This is a plum, and I'll talk about how I'm managing some of these diseases that we have. This plum has had a disease for the last 5 years since we've had it. This is another pear. There's another apple here, an oak there, and that's sort of the margin of this, you know, just an easy access that I wouldn't call mostly a food forest. Now below all of these areas are horseradish, there's small honey locust, we have different nitrogen fixers, we have Siberian pea plants as well. So, and this is loaded with kale along in here, clover in here. And I'll be excavating along here because I'm going to be bringing another network line going out to the sugar shack there eventually. And there's Hank over there sniffing where one of the deer were here, digging down into one of our mycelial beds. We have these large beds that we put in. So now we're out. So we looked at, I hope this video is making sense. So that's pond 4, a large pond right there, and you'll see that's the one that in the overhead videos you'll see the all of the lily pads completely covering that. And I never posted, there's several videos I never posted. It just takes me so long to edit them. But there's hosta berries on each side of different trees. So this is a pawpaw. That's a mulberry tree there. Here's one of our, that's a peach tree. Then we have an apricot, an apriplume, several small apples that I'm trying to grow up from seed below that. And, well, we'll actually walk down this area some. And these white tubes, I'll post a link in the upper left-hand corner. Well, let me just say here, I believe this is another one of my apples. A lot of we get such high winds, it's tough around here. So where Hank is sniffing right now, these are the beds where last night the deer were in, and they were digging up the areas and getting all the material. This is a cherry here. That's you probably saw the deer underneath this. This is a Canadian hemlock tree here. These are apricots, various different apples. This is one of those plums that I have the black nut with, and I've still got to deal with that. So Hank's out here munching down on some of the deer droppings. Yes, Hank. And they'll bed down all along in here. This one here is a pluot apple. This is another honey locust here. So we have lots of different locust trees. And there's a walnut here, another pluot here, apples, an apricot and a plum mix here. And then we get into some of the other areas. So this is what we call the first food forest. There's another English walnut here. These are all gooseberries all along in here. And the deer, you know, I've got to get an area that I've got to section them off. So as things happen, so this is another hemlock up here, and these are all peach trees. All these tree tubes all along in here have some trees that I just planted last year. And in previous videos I've talked about deer rub and the deer taking out so many of the trees. They'll just eat them down without these tree tube guards on them. So this would just get munched right down. So they really help. Now these tree tubes also help to protect from what I call sun scald, where we get the sugars on a warm day and the sun reflects. Now we don't have too many sunny days here during the wintertime. That's what our sky looks like all the time. And Dar, you probably remember that, and that's probably one of the reasons why you went down south. But as the sun comes up and it reflects and it warms up the trunks of the dark tree, the sugars that are stored in the roots start to pull up, and then it freezes quickly and the tree trunks split. And these tree tubes actually help to protect the trees during these first couple of years. And it isn't ideal, but at least it's working for protecting our trees, at least on this site. And I'll be showing how I'm going to modify some of the tree tubes this next year. So we have, I think, 58 varieties of apples, and these are all ones that basically got wiped out on me a year and a half ago. And we have catnip in locations. We have lemon balm here. We have, I'm trying to keep the spearmints, the mints under control, because they'll take over. This is a ginkgo here. And here, these are all store-bought, basically, blueberries. So we have Blue Golds, Patriot, and another high bush one. Now the deer have been chopping these off, and I'll put a net over them this year, hopefully. These are all the native ones that I transplanted up here, and they're probably, the berries, although they're smaller, they're loaded with more anthocyanins, so they're actually much better. So what we're doing is we're mixing all of these different trees, and I've had troubles. I've had the deer rub, I've had the winds come and tear some of the trees down, so it is a challenge, but things are constantly evolving. Now, I don't mow the lawns. Now, I do come through once to twice a year and chop down the areas, but we're constantly harvesting all of the beneficial medicinal herbs that are right underneath the snow right here that are popping up. There's tons of yarrow and various other medicinal herbs as well. I've got a lot of pruning to do around here. So that's a ginkgo. We have the apples. That's a magnolia. This is one of my favorite apples. And this is one of the trees I showed previously. It's one of our nectarines. And I never harvested the nectarines this year, and one of the reasons is we had such a wet season that the fungi got after them. And I showed some of these shots, I think it was a year ago. I'll see if I can find the link. But there was terrible deer rub, and you see how well, I don't know if that's even showing up. We'll have to wait until it's a brighter day to show some of the the repairs that nature's been doing. These are berry bushes all along in here, hosta berries and different currants. These are currant bushes along in here as well. This is much more impressive during the summertime. And various peaches, nectarines, along in here, and other apples. This is one of our first raspberry areas here. All these tree tubes here are all the service berries. Now we have several different regions on the property that we planted all the service berries. On the other side of the solar panels there are more raspberries over there. Oh, this whole area here we have Asian pears and your typical Bartlett pears and all as well. I can't remember the names right now, but apples and pears, some cherries in here. I'm crossing one of the drainage swales. Fortunately, it's still frozen pretty solid. Here's one of the oaks. Different plums, more oaks, more blueberry bushes around. The deer have really wreaked havoc on many of our elderberries. So the same deer rub on all our elderberries. The almond trees have been doing very well. So this is one of the almonds. And the only ones that really make it here are the Hall's Hardy ones. The rest of them just don't do that well. Over underneath this area here are all the green vegetables, and it's broccoli, collards, cauliflower, kale in there that we planted for the deer as well. And they've been going over and digging them at different times of the season. I was going to take you up to the second food forest, but I thought when spring comes and different times of the year, it'd probably be very good for me to just go ahead and start documenting what we have around and all. But, so what does the food forest do for us? Well, they certainly provide lots of food, you've seen. And one of the most important things about a food forest is that it's a regenerative investment. You've heard me talk about investments before. You spend the time and the energy, the initial expense, putting in a system like this. And the system is not like putting an apple tree in a lawn. An apple tree in a lawn is like, raising a kid in a closet is how I look at it. And I'm not trying to knock people that have one or two fruit trees in their lawns. I think that's a good thing. It's better than not having the fruit trees at all. But it's like in the lifestyle medicine series that I'll be expanding on. One of the things that's so important is having companions, having systems support each other. So. So what does a food forest, I'm messing things up. What does a food forest supply us with? Well, food, fuel, fiber, fun, pharmacy. So, and it's a place where, for me, it's a spiritual place for me to be. It's a place for me to commune with nature. There's an abundance of wildlife here, going from I'm just amazed by studying the lichen to really watching the eagles and the osprey come down to the ponds and fish. It's just a never-ending educational facility for me. So it provides many, many things. A food forest does. And you design a food forest based on what your goals are. You could design a food forest that's basically a medicinal food forest. Just like having the ginkgos. You can have a food forest that's geared for whatever your goals and aspirations are, based on your climate, your topography, and water access, all of those elements. But a food forest, like in nature, if you really observe nature and understand what's involved in it, it's a food web, and so there is no waste. And so when we design a system, you know, we need to have all of those components, including the mushrooms. And when I say mushrooms, the big part's underground, and that's the mycelial network, which is like the internet. This day and age, we're really cultures that are so dependent on the internet, and that connecting us all and information is being disseminated so quickly, and resources can get from place to place in no time. And so there's this whole network of all the organisms, from the microorganisms to the upper canopy to the other layers of the forest, the subcanopy, the bushes and shrubs, the herbaceous layer, the ground cover, the vining layer, the root zone, and even the epiphytes. Everything is connected, and that creates a whole, and that's just what we're talking about in that situation, is just the various flora, and now the fauna. All of the other larger organisms, if we're doing it correctly, we have hedgerows and swale systems with different mounds and rock features around here that create vital habitats for all the beneficial animals that are indigenous to our area, that provide multiple functions. So we really, this day and age, now we're bee stewards, so that's the honey hut back there for caring for and being stewards of the land and being stewards of that important insect. Well, they're an introduced species. We don't, the native insects that are in this area don't get the recognition, and they're being bombarded with all of the petrochemicals and the pesticides that are being used in such enormous volumes that they're destroying many of our native pollinators. And those are just two tips of the iceberg. So when we're creating a food forest, we're capturing solar energy, we're capturing we're utilizing solar energy to provide harvests in many different ways, and we're also capturing carbon and sequestering carbon at the same time. And we're providing habitats for a diversity of species that are beneficial, that can keep check with some of the pest species that plague us when we do monoculture. And that's the corn rows or the alfalfa, whatever it is that the soybeans and all, or the wheat, the monocultures of wheat, whatever it is, that whatever part of the world you're in. So I guess I'm just babbling at this point. So I hope that gave you an idea. Now, again, I'll have to shoot a video about our food forest during the seasons that are green, and I think that may be much more revealing of why we're doing this. Being able to come out here, even in the early spring, and grab and eat as you walk along, well, you just realize the beauty of everything that you know, God, Goddess, Creator, whatever your belief system is, it's just an amazing abundance that we have. And all we have to do is stop over tweaking things and mimic what nature has already been trying to teach us. So hopefully I'll post this video. I'm not positive how well it's going to come out, but I thank you so much for the comments, and thanks, Dar. I appreciate your questions. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. If you think this was of value, give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. That helps us out to get the word out about the things that we're doing. And by all means, have a fantastic day and stay warm. Bye-bye now.